Welcome to Beyond. My name is Whitney Jennifer, and that's Terri Daniel's dog, Scooty. We are here. We're having our very first summit on the afterlife, and Terri is here to moderate. So I just want Terri to take a moment and introduce all of the amazing people that we have on the show with us today.
Oh, great. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you, my wonderful speakers, for being here. I'm so honored to have you. And I'm going to just go down the list and introduce you quickly, starting with John Holland, who many of you probably know. He's an internationally renowned psychic medium who's been lecturing, teaching, and reading for about 20 years now. And he brings incredible messages from the other side, and he also teaches workshops on psychic development to help people learn how to find their own connection with the other side.
Hello, everyone.
And then moving on to William Buhlman. Does the camera switch on its own? And William is an expert in out-of-body journeying. He has taught workshops at the Monroe Institute for I don't know how many years, but he's been doing this work for 40 years, thereabouts. And he has several books about the afterlife and out-of-body experiences. So welcome, Bill. We're really happy to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And Karen Wyatt, Dr. Karen Wyatt, she's an MD. She comes from a background in working with hospice and nursing homes and people with end of life. And her focus is on bringing traditional physical Western medicine into harmony with spiritual practices. So her expertise is really on helping people cross over and dealing with end of life issues. And then me, finally, I'm Terri Daniel. I'm the founder of the Afterlife Conference. I am a clinical chaplain, so my expertise is also in working with end of life from a spiritual and theological perspective. So we've got four really different but complementary views here, and we came up with an interesting way to make them all fit together and present them.
And everyone out there knows, if you have a question or a comment and you want to join the conversation, use the Google Hangouts app, or you can also use the hashtag BWPresents. So Terri, how are we going to do this? How are we going to cover all of these very intriguing and different perspectives?
Well, this actually came to me yesterday. I thought what we would do is take an imaginary journey through the process of death and beyond, because we can each address that. So I thought we'd come up with a story of a fictitious person who is dying. We will call this person Joe. And Joe right now is on his deathbed, as you would say. He's in hospice care. It could be in a hospital or a nursing home. He could even be having his last breaths in an emergency room or an acute situation. But we're going to just put him in a hospice for the sake of this. And all of us can jump in any time, but I thought we'd kind of each address our area of expertise. So Karen, as a doctor, can talk about what she might do or what a death doula might do at the bedside with Joe. Mm-hmm. I can talk about what I might do as a chaplain to help Joe deal with his questions about the afterlife and help his family with their theological conundrums. And then William can talk about what is Joe experiencing as he begins to die, as he goes in and out of consciousness, which when we see him from this side, he looks like he's unconscious. But when we see him from the other side, where John can see him and where Bill can see him, he's very conscious and more alive than ever. So they can talk about what's happening to the soul of Joe. And then we've got it covered. So why don't we just, and feel free to jump in anytime.
Okay.
And why don't we just start with Karen? What's happening to Joe right now, Karen? He's hours from death, maybe minutes.
All right. Well, in my job as the hospice physician, I would have been coming in along with nurses and nursing aides to visit with Joe to help make sure his physical symptoms are managed well. So we would be using medications or whatever was necessary to make sure Joe is physically as comfortable as possible. We would want to help alleviate his pain and physical suffering to any extent that we could, so that Joe would be free to actually confront his death and the spiritual issues of death and dying that are coming up for him. In my role as the physician, I would oftentimes be present during the dying process, and I viewed my role as helping the patient and the family with fear, because fear is one of the things that I found really interferes with with peaceful dying. So my job would be to help talk to the family and the patient about what to expect and what's happening and what's coming next. One of my greatest privileges was to be there with the patient, however, during that active dying phase, when the patient is semi-comatose and, as you were describing, in between worlds in a sense, and to just experience the changes that come over the patient during that time and be present for that, and to understand that patient is journeying somewhere during that time, still with us, but also journeying in another realm.
Karen, have people asked, you must have seen this, people who are about to pass, have you witnessed people reaching out to people that aren't physically there, or calling out people's names, you know, deathbed visions? Yes? Can you talk a little bit? You've seen this, yes?
Yes, often. Yes, I've had patients who talked about brothers and sisters who have passed before them, who were in the room waiting for them and coming for them. I had one patient who kept he told us his brother was there and was trying to get him to leave, and he said, "I'm telling him no because I'm not ready yet."
Oh,
and
right.
his brother stayed for a couple of weeks, actually. His brother kept coming before that patient died.
And what do you tell people, Karen, for there are many people, they may have their mother, their father, their child, and the person who is about to pass is saying, oh, so-and-so is here. And a lot of people say, oh, poor thing, it must be the medication, when in fact it's not always the medication. So what can you say to people who are listening right now, who watch this video, if your person who is about to pass is seeing someone who has passed over, what does the person who's observing that person, you know, their mother, their father, what should they say to them? I usually say, what do they look like? What are they saying?
That's what I would encourage, is just give the patient time to talk about it, ask them questions, let them tell you whatever they want to say, and don't disbelieve it or try to explain it away. Though I've seen a lot of medical people who say, oh, you're hallucinating from the medication. But I would encourage family, always believe it and actually view it as something very positive and very good. Whoever is coming for the patient is there to help them and help alleviate fear and suffering. And so I always see that as a very positive sign when that happens.
Awesome. Okay. Just curious, you as a doctor, I wanted to know, because I know a lot of hospice workers and nurses and therapists work with people. It's very rare with the doctors.
Yeah.
And that's why we're so lucky we have Karen on our team and coming to the Afterlife conference. We want more people like her, more doctors and nurses who are coming from the clinical perspective. John, I have a question for you. When you talk to people on the other side, do they ever or frequently talk about what it's like to die, the process of what they experienced around the time that Karen is referring to? And Bill, you might have some thoughts on this as well.
Well, sometimes they'll see, I already get them when they're already there. So they would, you know, it's true. But they will talk about, I just did a reading for someone who, on Saturday was a drowning, but they banged their head. So the person who came for the reading, the spirit that passed over, let me know that there was no pain, that they didn't pass from the drowning, they didn't feel the drowning sensation. It was, you know, they were immediately crossed over. So they will tell me lots of times what happened before they passed. And it's more how it's more, you know, whether I clairsentiently I'll feel what they passed like, you know, whether if they fell asleep, if it was a peaceful passing. And of course, they always talk about who came and talk about deathbed visions. They always tell me who was there to greet them. And strange thing, you may think your mother's going to be there. She's the one. It may be an uncle. It may be a brother. It may be an animal. You know, so it's not. You'd be surprised who comes and gets you. So yes, they do talk about what it was like before they passed. Not all the time, though.
And William, so what have you seen or experienced of people at this particular phase, like the very last moments on Earth? They're beginning to separate, and they're just on the other side immediately. What happens there?
Well, what the feedback that I've gotten from many people is that it's there's a transitional phase where you are essentially shifting your consciousness from one energy body, your physical body, to another energy body, your non-physical body. And what people have reported to me is that they literally, it's almost like shifting gears. it's an easy transition because they're starting to loosen all the attachments to the physical, or of course they're coming to an end, and they're spending more and more time in the non-physical realms. And during that phase, that's when they have a lot of communication with loved ones. There's a lot of visitations that are reported. There's a tremendous amount of communication with people that have already died. And it's generally people that are what we would call today close relatives, or what some of us may interpret to be soul group members that are communicating. And it's this phase can last. Everybody's different, but it's a wonderful integration. I think in a sense this is the soul's concept or integration period, where it has that opportunity to reintegrate into this new energy environment. And so you get to adapt to this new non-physical reality. And that's what I think is naturally occurring during this whole process of contact that occurs for this, especially in the last week or two of what they call transition or the death process.
And I'll add a little metaphysical spin on that I was taught by my guides, and they said it so beautifully, is that when you're with a person who's dying, their breathing obviously changes. They can breathe faster, or sometimes they breathe really slow, like 4 respirations a minute as opposed to 20 or 30, whatever is normal. And it was told to me that as the breaths become fading and infrequent on earth, each breath turns to light in heaven. What is breath on earth becomes light in heaven. So you're almost inhaling light as you're doing that separation process. And I was once with a hospice patient, and she was what people on earth would call unconscious, and she was very close to death, and I was just sitting and looking at her, and she opened her eyes and looked at me and sent me a telepathic thought, and it very clearly said, "It's like swimming." And I knew what she meant, because swimming, you come up for a breath and then you go in and you come up for a breath, and that's what she was doing. She was coming up, even though it's not really up, into the higher realms of consciousness to catch a breath of light as she was giving up her breaths on earth. So I think we've all seen that moment in various ways. Karen, I'm interested in, I'm just kind of going back to the physical world. We're going to jump between worlds a lot here. Who is present in a clinical setting to be that guide, who understands the stuff that we just all talked about, who can walk a person through that phase? In my experience, hardly anybody.
Well, and their families as well.
Families need it too, and we need that.
I would agree with that. Oftentimes there isn't anyone in the family, and I played that role because I was so interested in it, and because I had this spiritual awareness about death and dying. I would be one of the people in our hospice that would get called, especially if a patient was having a difficult time. And one time a woman was terrified. She was experiencing so much fear. And it was just hours before she died, but she was extremely fearful. But I knew from talking with her, she had never had any sort of belief in an afterlife or in a God or any type of spiritual awareness in her life. So I took her hands and I said to her, whatever you are experiencing right now, it's okay for you. It doesn't matter that you never believed in it before. It's okay for you to receive it. And she took a huge breath, and I just felt all of the fear and the pain disappear from her, and then she was able to go into that process, and a few hours later able to just die peacefully. But she needed help. She needed a guide and someone to say, this is okay. What you're going through is all right, and it's okay for you to receive it.
Yeah, in my perfect world, you and John and Bill and I would be present at every death in every hospital, or someone like us. This is hopefully where our culture is going, I hope. You know, that this should be a staff position in an emergency room or in an ICU, and of course it just doesn't exist. A chaplain is the closest thing we have, but as chaplains we're really limited as to what we can do. And it's interesting you said that woman didn't have any beliefs. I found that people who call themselves atheists or believe that when they die it's just blackout, flat, nothing, suffer and struggle the most.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
Bill, you have a comment on that at all?
We actually lost Bill, so Cindy's in the process of trying to get him back. But I'm very curious about that as well too, John. One of the books that we recently published is talking about atheism and that belief system. And as Terri just said, it's like a lot of people have a lot of fear leading up to that. And I'm curious, what is it? Have you spoken with people on the other side who had those beliefs in life?
Well, I've had people say my father was an atheist, and a lot of people will say, well, what happened to my dad when he passed away? He was an atheist. And I said, well, I imagine he just went, damn, this is real. It really is an afterlife. So it's true, it doesn't matter. But I've had people on the other side come through who were atheists and say to their wife or to their children, oh my God, everything you said, because usually there's one person who believed in an afterlife. They will say everything you said is true, and they will give evidence, of what it's like on the other side and what the people are doing here. So yeah, it doesn't matter if it is good to follow a religious belief or a faith, because I think because all faiths talk about the afterlife, so I think it's helpful. But if you're an atheist, I think I think you're just in for a bit of a surprise when you go over.
That's true. And here's another question for you, John. Does communication from the other side to us happen more when the person is newly deceased? Does it fade away over time or change?
I've had people come through, good question. I've had people come through, Terri, that passed away. First of all, I always say to someone, if you lose someone, don't run to a medium. Because you're going through so much, you're so emotional, and you could go see a medium a week after, and the medium's telling you things, if the person's coming through, they can't even take it in, mentally, physically, emotionally. I've had mothers that are just crying, and I had to say, now is not the time, So, they have, what was the question? I'm sorry?
So does the communication change?
Right, yes, absolutely, yes. Not really. I'm surprised when they come through so fast. It could be 24 hours, but it doesn't matter. I was in Maine once, and I was doing a small gathering, and it was only 40 people, and I said, who lost a brother right here in the back row? And there was silence. And I said, who lost a brother here in the back row? Silence. There was only like 4 chairs there, so I got off the stage, and I walked over there, and I said to the woman, I said to the row, who lost the brother here? And a woman raised her hand. She goes, well, I lost my brother, but that was 25 years ago. I said, but he's still dead. I said, it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? So just because they're over there, people think here that, they may have lost their mom or their dad 50 years ago. And then they say, well, he's gone so long. I said, but he's still over there. He still has communication. So it doesn't matter. But there were some times, too, where, like, I lost a half-sister. I have an aunt. They've never come through, ever. And I can't explain why that happens. And, maybe if I went into spoke to spirit about it, and whether there, some people like, well, did they reincarnate? There's a whole reincarnation belief that I believe that we can talk about later. But I also find it amazing. I just did a small group, guys, okay? Like I'll do 6 or 8 people. Some amazing messages came through me, not from me, through me, from spirit, through spirit, to spirit, yeah? And I found that the best messages are the people who really, some people come to see me out of curiosity. Let me see what happens. I find the best readings, as far as evidential, the wow readings, are people who really, really need the reading. People who are bereaved. Because I've had people come and they're like, oh, I just wanted to see who comes through. And they're like this, the readings. I believe the stronger the bereavement, the stronger the connection, or the stronger the need for the reading. Yeah.
Well, with bereavement, a broken heart is an open heart.
Ooh, very good.
But when people are bereaved, it cracks you open.
Right.
And that wound, what they consider a wound, I consider an opening in the heart. And so it puts you in a more receptive place. And Bill, are you back with us?
He's back.
Okay. I have a question for you, Bill. So,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
John was just talking about how a person who's been dead for 25 years can suddenly come up in a reading, and I expect that's because time operates differently in that dimension. Can you comment a little bit about how time works there versus here, or how time doesn't even exist?
Well, based on all of the surveys we've done and all of the evidence that's been collected over the past 40 years, there is no linear time. Our concept of time only seems to exist in the physical world. We have to remember, when people die, they go to a non-physical reality. There's no biological bodies there. There are all the things that we're used to: gravity, air, organs in our bodies, 5 senses. All the rules of the road are changed completely in the non-physical realities. And people, they function in an energy, let's just call it an energy body, that has a different set of rules. And those that die have to adapt to that new construct that they're now existing in, which is actually our home, of course. I mean, we're non-physical spiritual beings. I mean, that's what we are. We're just temporarily visiting this planet and having this very brief experience. But we are essentially, we're a non-physical species using biological bodies for experience, to learn and to grow and to obtain knowledge from personal, sometimes gut-wrenching experiences. It's part of our evolutionary journey. So yes, this concept of time is only, I've only witnessed it here, and others that have the same kind of, let's just say, explorations of consciousness report the exact same thing. That as a, let's face it, let's sum it up by this: what's time to an immortal? And we're immortal.
Right, so true. And we can experience nonlinear time in a variety of ways. We experience it in the dream world. In the dream world, things are happening simultaneously. We can experience it in deep meditation. We can certainly experience it with the proper psychedelic substances that can help us go there too. Some of us have. And what other ways can we experience nonlinear time and that sense of oneness while we're in the body? Any thoughts about that?
Well, if I just real quickly, I'd like to add, that's one of the big advantages of self-initiated out-of-body experiences. Mm-hmm. People have an opportunity to experience these states because OBEs are, you can repeat them under your own control, and that's what makes them so valuable. No one wants to have an NDE. And let's face it, generally they're shocking experiences, and they last for only a few minutes at most. But with an OBE, you get an opportunity with control, once you get used to it, to explore these non-physical realms. And that's when you can get really a good handle on these concepts of non-linear, and these concepts of also that we're not physical, that we're a non-physical species.
Yes, absolutely. And also, the shamans have been doing this for tens of thousands of years. Yes. And that's why, here's my plug for the Afterlife Conference. That's why we have shamans at the Afterlife Conference. And that's why we have Bill teaching journeying and out-of-body experience, because we are all about letting people experience this non-ordinary reality where we're not bound by the denseness of the physical body, by the attachments of the ego. And so we, at the Afterlife Conference, really try to give people hands-on experiences and workshop work that they can do to become familiar with this realm. Because everybody, at least the people who come to our conference, really want to be able to move between these worlds. And this brings me to something that I think...
Can I pause 1 second?
Yeah.
Since you just so beautifully described the Afterlife Conference, okay. I want to let everybody out there knowing that if you're watching now...
Shameless promotion.
Shameless promotion. You can go to www.beyondword.com/afterlife15. And today we're offering like a really awesome deal. You can get the live stream of the 2015 conference, which will be in Virginia Beach. So if you can't make
Norfolk.
So yeah. Sorry. If you can't make it there, you can watch the live stream, and it's for 3 days. And when are the exact dates?
June 4th through 7th.
June 4th through 7th. So you can watch the live stream, and on top of that, that is going for $97. And on top of that, you can get for $2 the recordings of everything from last year. So you can get the 2014 and 2015 streams for $99. So go to beyondword.com/afterlife15 and grab that. And then Terri has another question.
You say that a little slower, beyondthewords.com.
I don't
A little slower. Just a little slower, Whitney.
Sure. It's beyondword.com/afterlife15. The number 15.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
people are watching this live right now. They have these on their screens, but if they're watching it archive, that so. And it's Beyond Word, not words.
Well, not words.
Yeah, beyondword.com/afterlife15.
And if you have any questions as we're talking, please be sure to send them in. You can use the Google Hangouts app, or you can also use the hashtag BWPresents.
Okay, so this is something that you can all comment on this shared death experience. A lot of people are doing research on this. This is Raymond Moody's new research, also at the University of California, Santa Barbara. William Peters is doing research on this, where when you are with somebody dying, that you can actually journey with them. And when I found out people were researching this, I had to laugh because I do it all the time with hospice. To me, it's just natural, and I imagine you've done that too, Karen. Mm-hmm. You know, I found sitting with a dying person who's actively dying, what I do is I synchronize my breaths with theirs, if possible. And if I watch them and I will breathe exactly like they're breathing, and I will go into a very deep state, and I can see what they're seeing. I can feel what they're feeling. It's the most peaceful, blissful experience I have ever had in a body, because I guess I'm not in my body. And anything you guys would like to say about that? You probably all have something to say. Karen, why don't you go first and tell me about your shared death experiences that you may have had?
Well, when I mentioned the patient who was really terrified and anxious when I held her hands and sat with her, I could see what she was seeing, which to me was beautiful, the light, but I understood that it was frightening to her because she didn't know what to think of it. She didn't know what to make of it. And so that's why she just needed a little bit of reassurance that this was okay. It was okay for her to go to that light and to receive the love that was there for her. And I've done it with others also. I primarily get called in when someone's having a hard time, when they're frightened or scared. So I can go and be with them and then bring them just a calm reassurance that they're safe and that this is beautiful and they're loved. So that's primarily how I journey with the patient.
And what about drugs? I mean, you know, when somebody is heavily drugged with morphine and Ativan, it has no effect on their soul whatsoever, right? The soul is, you know, it just calms down the body, but the soul's just dancing up a storm.
Yes, exactly. I do think it may make it more difficult for some of those patients to communicate when they're in that active dying phase. If they're very heavily drugged, it might be harder for them to kind of wake up and talk to their family a little bit, because I've seen patients going back and forth, and some of the more heavily drugged ones are less likely to comment to their family, but as far as I know, it's not affecting the experience of the soul at all.
No, I don't see how it could. And that's all the more reason why we have to teach ourselves to experience shared death, so that we can know what they're experiencing, because they can't talk because they're so drugged.
Exactly.
Let's see.
So I have a question. A long time ago, well, not that long ago, but my grandfather passed away, and I don't know how she knew this, but my grandmother, who was very close with my grandfather, obviously, she knew when he was going to die. Like, she actually called us all into the room. It was not a nurse. It was not anything like that, and she said she did not use her nurse abilities, because she was a nurse a long time ago, to determine when that was, but she just knew. And I guess for me, I'm worried that I will miss that sign. So how do people know that?
Well, I can answer it from the medical point of view. when you're a caregiver, I was just a caregiver for my mom when she passed away 2 years ago, and when you're with someone 24 hours a day and they're going through that dying process, you really tune in to that person and what's happening for them, and you can feel the changes in their energy as they're taking place. You can really feel it, even if you're not a person who's been attuned to that before, you can sense it. So I've seen many caregivers, just like your grandmother, who knew who could pinpoint when their loved one would die, and they're not someone who in the past had that kind of a metaphysical experience before, but they knew it from being so connected to the loved one at the end of life.
And what about helpers from the other side, John? You know, friends, soul visitors who might come. Do they ever give any indication of like that? You know, that I'm waiting. When my son died, his grandmother came to me a couple of days before, and I never had visions of her, ever. And she just showed up so clearly and, you know, essentially said, I'll be here for him. You know, I knew he was dying. And that must happen all the time. So what are the souls on the other side doing when they're watching their loved ones on this side getting ready to die?
All right. Can we go back to Joe?
Yes, please.
Right.
I forgot about Joe. Sorry, Joe.
Right? Remember Joe? He's like stuck in between the middle now. So, you know, he was dying. So, well, first of all, the shared death experience I've never experienced because I get them afterwards. I just had a woman who lost one of her family members, and she did actually almost go up, but she couldn't, and she came back. But when someone is, I know, like Karen, before my mom passed, she was on morphine and she was on Ativan, Karen, too. So she was already, when I got there, she was already 1 foot here, like Bill said, 1 foot here, 1 foot on the other side. I've had people on the other side tell me that I may be giving a message to someone in the audience, and a father will come through for her daughter, and say the mother is sick, and I never predict, or I can't know when someone's going to pass, but I know I'll say to the daughter in the audience, your father said he'll be waiting. He'll be waiting. So they know that their mother's close, you know, and I don't want to scare everyone, but if I do say that, but the person in a reading usually steps forward who will announce, I'll be there if you need me. And when my mom passed, a lot of people think because I'm a medium that I walk into a room, if I walk into a hospice, when my mom was passing, I was just John the man. I didn't walk in there like looking, I didn't open up my third eye, and, you know, but just before she was going to pass, I was there with my 2 brothers, and I'm one of 5 kids, and we're all around my mom, and she was, I got there, and 90 minutes later, 90 minutes, she waited till I came back from Toronto, Canada, and I said to my brother Joe, have you ever, and the audience members and you guys, have you ever felt someone stand behind you in line? You just feel it. You turn around, and sometimes it's too close, you know. So I felt somebody step forward. It was my grandmother. I just knew it. I wasn't in medium mode. I said, Joe, Grandma's here. She's ready to go. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, Joe, put your hand on her chest. Danny and Joe, put your hand on her chest. She's about to go. Then I felt my grandfather. Then my sister. I felt 4 presents, literally, and my shoulders were like, they're here. And they said, what are you talking about? I said, Joe, put your hand, and Danny, put your hand on her chest. And then she raised her chest, and then she left. So it was like perfect timing. I felt them literally come into the room, and whether it was I was mediumistic at that moment or I was simply aware in that quiet space. And I think other people might feel it in the room, Karen, where someone's like, what? I feel something different in the room. Yeah? And Karen, you've seen this too for people. How about people, they're on their deathbed, they're about to pass, and then, or they're sick, and all of a sudden, they come back to life, and they got all this energy, and a lot of people, look, she's made a turnaround. I was told, I've seen this happen, but I don't want everyone, once again, if your loved one is coming back, I've seen people say that it's like the soul revving up, getting ready to go. So, but I don't want people to think, if you have a sick loved one and they are coming back, doesn't mean they're revving to go. I mean, you know, so it could be just that their health is coming back. But many times, Karen, have you experienced this where people all of a sudden, they have all this energy, and then someone may say, she was fine yesterday, and then she left?
Yes, I've seen many patients who in some ways had their very best day the day before they died. the day when they were lucid, were able to communicate with all their family members, and a lot of times they had important messages they wanted to give to people. So that's how I interpreted it, that there was something really important that needed to be said, and they came back to make sure they got that message across.
Yep, brilliant. And Terri, you asked me, I know when someone is about to pass that the loved ones are gathering around them, that they are gathering around, because I will get evidence from the person that passed saying Uncle Joe was here, my grandfather came to get me, the dog was right there. So I know that those on the other side, they know that when someone's about to pass. And I think it's almost like, and I know I use a lot of humor, everybody. I do, and guys, you'll know that too, the rest of the speakers, when I get there, because I'm not about death. I'm not about death, because this is not about death. And you know the expression, you can't die for the life of you. You can't. You like that? You can't die for the life of you. But I want people to know that there is always, even if someone passes tragically, they never go home alone. And I think Bill knows this too, and Karen, nobody ever goes home alone, because a lot of people are like, is my child okay? And is there, are they there with someone? Absolutely, absolutely.
We can't ever be alone because we're all connected. You know, there is no such thing as disconnection anywhere. Bill, I want to let's go back to Joe. I don't want to forget Joe or Bill. So here's Joe. Now he's died. He's taken his last breath. So an hour, a few hours, couple days, I don't know what, have gone by. Bill, can you talk to us about different realms, different levels of the afterlife? I know the shamans have it broken down into 9 upper worlds and 9 lower worlds and the middle world. What have you learned about the different? I imagine that it's an infinite number of realms because they are really states of consciousness and they can't be limited. What do you know about that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you said that very well. It's about states of consciousness, and because of that, it is infinite number of realities that exist. And it's not a physical space. There's no limitation because we're not dealing with 3-dimensional matter anymore. What Joe would experience essentially is that Joe would, of course, enter a non-physical reality, be reunited with some loved ones, and then in the first, he would assimilate into his new energy body, which is a non-physical energy body. Most of the time, people that die they appear younger because their self-identity is molding their non-physical body because it's thought responsive. So what I and others have explored and have seen and well over 40 years is this. There's consensus realities created by collective consciousness of people that join together of like mind. And they build individual collective consciousness realities that are very specific to their state of consciousness and their beliefs. In other words, people of like mind will essentially stick together, those that have known each other in the past and have the same belief systems. So that's why at the Monroe Institute it's often referred to as belief territories, because those of like mind will join with one another. And it's endless. I call these consensus realities. And there's countless millions of these realities. And each individual state of consciousness helps to mold these realities. And a new, let's say, a returnee like Joe he would assimilate, and then he would go to a reality that resonates with his state of consciousness. And more than likely that would be with his loved ones that he has resonated with in the past. And it's a wonderful reunification. But on the flip side, we also have to be aware that there's also a certain limitation involved in this process because we are reuniting with others. We're not reuniting with Buddha and enlightened beings necessarily. We're reuniting with others of like mind. And that in itself creates a self-imposed limitation that many people don't talk about. And that's where I think it's good to become knowledgeable about the afterlife and the afterlife journey so we can enhance our journey at death. Because there's choices that are made. People think there's no choices. And the opposite is true. Our choices are expanded, not reduced. And the more we know about our opportunities that are available to us, the more we can make an enlightened transition to a, let's just say, a higher vibratory reality that is available to us. Because the only one that limits us is us.
Right.
You know, so we have to be careful. Sometimes I use the term, be careful what you believe. Because we always have to be on guard to be careful to always be reappraising our beliefs, because that will affect not only our present life, but it will also affect our afterlife, because we will reunite in a consensus reality that resonates with our state of consciousness. So that's why it's so important. Buddha said it so well about elevating our state of consciousness, illuminating our whatever word you want to use now, so that we can have more, let's say, choices and opportunities also in the afterlife. And know that we have endless choices, because many people don't. They accept the first reality that appears to them, they go there, and they don't even consider the fact that there's choices that we have.
Right.
And I think this is very important to get across.
So in the afterlife, because everything is thought responsive, as you said, so a person has the free will to accept the first reality they see and not go any further than that. But aren't there teachers or angels or helping beings that offer the possibilities to you? Like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you know, which you read to a dead person for the first 40 days of their journey, is all about guiding them. This is what the shamans do too. And they say, okay, you know, now you're going into the realm of the angry demons. And look over here to your right, and you'll see a beautiful tree. Go toward the tree. Go away from the demons, because the demons are projections of your fears and the stuff that you've carried with you through the many lifetimes. So those opportunities are offered on the other side, as I understand it. Comments? Any?
Yes. Yes, I think that's the whole choice. We have endless choices that we can make. In other words, we have the ability, I feel, at death, through our own actions, to maybe enhance our state of consciousness by what we do in those last. For instance, instead of being fearful, many people go to death fearful. Imagine if everyone in their last moments of death thought of spiritual, used a chant like spiritual essence now as their last conscious thought, or higher self now, or whatever phrase you want, as to propel themselves to the highest possible dimensional reality they can reach within themselves. And it's such a different that would make than being fear-based and totally clueless about what's about to happen. That's why I feel it's so important for us to become more knowledgeable about this subject, because let's face it, we're all heading there.
Yeah.
We're not going to avoid it, so let's become knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is why, you know, a phrase that I like to use is that I really like it when people are willing to have a theological overhaul in their life. And that happens a lot. That's triggered by grief. Because people with a really traumatic grief experience will say, well, why did God let my child die? And they ask me that question, and I'll say, well, it depends what you think God is. And among other things, this is an opportunity to question your theology and to question the reality that you're in and to let it change. And because it is thought responsive. And, you know, I'm jumping around now, but I remember in Robert Monroe's very first book that I read in the 70s, when he discovered that all he had to do was think of the backyard, and boom, he would be in the backyard. And that was a very new idea, even though it's an ancient idea. But it certainly caught on, and now we know that we can create anything with our thoughts, and I think changing our theology is really important. And I also want to say that a lot of people think that the minute you die, you become instantly enlightened. You drop the ego and you're this clear light, and we know that that's not true, and people bring their stuff with them. John, will you talk about that a little bit, about the pain and the anguish and the guilt and all the stuff they bring with them and how that gets processed on you?
Right. A lot of people think that when we cross over that we automatically become enlightened. It's the same people. If you had a father if you had a dad that was a piece of work, he wasn't a very nice man, and I come to somebody in the audience, he will overshadow me, not possess me, overshadow me, and I will bring through that personality of being difficult, and I will say to the person in the audience, oh, so your dad was a hard ass, yeah? Or your dad was tough. I said, or he wasn't very nice, was he? He's not like that anymore, okay? But he will give me those memories so you know that I'm actually talking to your dad. Because if you had a dad, say someone in the audience, you had a dad that was not such a great guy or not a nice man, and I came to you in an audience and I said, what a peaceful, kind, loving man I have here. The person in the audience is going to be like, that's not my dad. But they will come through, and you know what I mean, William? Okay, they will show me. I mean, I will feel what their dad was. So that person knows what they were like. But I know we go over there, and a lot of people say, too, I had a fight with my mother before we passed, never had the opportunity to say I'm sorry to her. And I say to them, she knows you're sorry. Just because somebody passes doesn't mean forgiveness stops. It works both ways. Lots of times they will come through from the other side and ask their daughter, I know that she forgave me. The person on the side very rarely says, can she forgive me? Because the person already knows that they forgave them, or that they're still working on it. Or your mother's telling me you still haven't gotten to the 100% forgiveness, have you? And the daughter will say, I'm working on it. So when you pass over, all those pains, all those aches, and as a medium, people will see this, I will bring through the amputated leg or the heart attack. They do not have these conditions anymore. It's the soul is whole. And just like Bill said earlier, about you, we're souls. You are a soul that comes with a body, not a body that comes with the soul. You are a soul first, before you came here, and you're going to be a soul long after you leave this vessel that we call a body. So people, when they do go over it, and just a funny note too, a lot of people, they do think that your mother, your father, your loved one becomes enlightened. I had a woman say to me, jokingly, I said, she said to me, can my father help me with my finances? And I said, well, how was he with money here? She said, he sucked. And I said, he still does. Yet when he crosses over that he becomes an accountant. But I do find it strange. Not strange, pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I will say to someone, your father's saying go on top of the roof, and he's talking about the crack in the chimney. And they said, oh my God, we just saw that crack. And I said, can you tell me what your dad did for a living? He was a contractor. So I trust if they were a contractor here and they're giving advice on the other side about your roof, that's what, you know, but they don't become all-knowing. And because a lot of people think, in the audience too, and all you guys, you know this, that when you cross over, why can't we find the cure for cancer? Why don't we know the cure for AIDS? Or why? It's not like that, guys. It's not, you don't become all enlightened. I do believe, I really believe, and when I do this work, they very rarely come through to give psychic predictions, okay? It's not their job to interfere with karma, your karma. I had two sisters sit with me once, and they said to me, they said, thank you, John, and then one of them sighed, and she just went, oh, and I said, were you not happy with that? She said, no, John, the reading was fine. She said, but my mother never told me, should I divorce my husband? And I said, that's not your mother's job on the other side, darling. They cannot interfere with the karmic lessons that you have here, the loves, the hurts, the pains. They can't get in that way sometimes because we're supposed to learn these lessons. Like Bill said, we come into this body to learn these lessons. So I still find, you know, guys, you'll see me at the Afterlife conference, and I don't have all the answers. I'm still amazed and fascinated by this. I can't wait to meet Karen and Bill. You got to have a cup of coffee with me, okay? I mean, I've been fascinated by out-of-body experiences. It's a whole nother world. I did it once, and then I fell, and I couldn't do it again, and I don't even know how. So I'm looking forward to this, Terry, to all the people that you have there. So not only will I be on stage, if the audience looks around, there's John. You will see me in the audience all the time.
Well, John, you could go to Bill's workshop. It's right after yours.
Okay.
I just wanted to say one quick thing about, you know, part of the reason that people think we become enlightened the minute we die is because of bad theology. And by bad theology, I mean there has been this belief perpetrated that people turn into angels when they die. And angels are something completely different from dead beings. And but people tend to glorify. So, I have a friend who just killed herself just this last weekend, and she was not very well liked by a lot of people, but also kind of admired by. She had a lot of followers, and everybody's glorifying her and forgetting the bad stuff, because when you're dead, you deserve this be raised up and glorified, and this theology that says you're with God and you're instantly pure, and all your bad stuff is left behind, and you grow a halo and you grow wings. And so I think that's where a lot of that comes from. There's nothing biblical or scriptural or any place that says that people turn into angels. I want to divert a minute because we have a really good question.
We have a viewer question from Patty, and she says, having worked in the hospice industry, I find that much of the conversation ends at the death, and there seems to be an unwillingness by hospice staff to speak about the afterlife, or if they do, it is in cloaked terms. Is this an unspoken directive?
It is a spoken directive. Would you agree, Karen? It is very clearly spoken in hospice work that we don't discuss anything spiritual. Now, there are spiritual hospices like the Zen Hospice in San Francisco and, you know, little pockets, but in my experience with hospice, it's a big no-no to talk about that. Unless the patient specifically asks you, well, doctor, what do you think happens when we die? And then you can answer in your own opinion, but it's really, really frowned upon. Just the work that we're all doing and the Afterlife Conference, I have tried to connect with hospice organizations and hospices, you know, in support, and they won't touch it. Karen, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a real fear, you know, because hospice, it's a form of medical care which comes from a very scientific background. And so everyone trained in hospice, at least as far as doctors and nurses, have this scientific, rational perspective on life and death. And even those who have, on their own, explored spirituality and have ideas of the afterlife are very afraid to speak it in front of their peers, as it could get them labeled as being a quack or being, you know, being someone unreliable. And so it's a big challenge for all of us in medicine, myself included, to come forward and say, well, this is how it really is, and this is how I see it, and to face our peers and risk being ostracized because of what we know and what we can see and understand. So that's why, sadly, it's missing a lot in hospice care, which is really tragic.
Well, I can understand that, because you may have someone who has a total disbelief, and I've had some people in my groups, in my audience, who say, well, I'm a hospice worker and I talk about the afterlife. I said, do you ask for permission before you do that? I'm a big believer. If someone, you don't want to scare someone who doesn't know anything about the afterlife to throw your belief on that sick person. But if there was an afterlife department in a hospice, you know, that would be different. A friend of mine, Maureen Hancock, beautiful medium. Families will call her this, and I'll tell you this. I've never done this except for my own mother. Actually, I just did it once this summer that just passed. Someone was about to pass away. She's a medium, and she works a lot in hospice. And a sister who's losing a mom will call her in. So on the day of the passing, and it's close, she walks into the room. You know how everyone's around the bed, and no one knows what to say, and they're all just staring at the poor woman. Some people will give her the evil eye and like, what are you doing here? And then the sister will have to speak up and say, I asked her to be here. And it's funny to watch. She said it's funny to watch all the family members around her when Maureen says, okay, so you know who's going to be there? Your Uncle Bill is waiting. Your Uncle Joe's here. Oh, look, your German Shepherd is here. It's beautiful. But she has to be requested to come in by the family. Yep. So.
And there's also a political correctness aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you don't want to offend anybody's beliefs. So in my training as a chaplain, I am taught to do everything for every religion. You know, when they say, well, what denomination are you? I say all of them, or none of them, whatever. You know, because I will pray with an evangelical Christian, I'll do the rosary with a Catholic, I'll do mantras and chants with a Buddhist. I have to know how to do all that, because if I walk in there and start talking about, oh, the life and all this kind of stuff, that's going to come up on somebody's toes. But I do think that hospices err to the extreme by protecting this political correct thing. And I love your idea, John, of having an afterlife department.
Right.
The chaplain department could be the afterlife department. That should be me. But I'm very limited as to what I can say and what I can do, unless it's...
Right. And a lot of people... Can I get back to Joe again?
Yes, please.
Okay. So Joe's in the afterlife we're in the afterlife, and I know we've got a few minutes left, and a lot of people say, well, what do they do on the other side, John? What do they do on the other side? I've had people come through, kids that have passed away suddenly, saying that they're helping other kids that have passed away suddenly. I've had people say, tell my mom I'm finishing my schooling here, tell my dad or my grandmother that I'm working the same way I work with dogs here. So I think you can do whatever you want in the afterlife, just like Bill was talking about, just like the movie, What Dreams May Come. Your own reality. I love that movie. I don't like the suicide part about that movie, though. It's kind of scary. But I do respect the vision of that movie. But you can do whatever you want. I've had people say, that they're in hospitals. Or I had one woman say, tell my granddaughter that I'm just on the porch playing dominoes like I always did. Is she really in the rocker playing dominoes? I don't know. But I think you can do whatever you want to do on the other side. There's unlimited possibilities. And I find it, they do almost the same thing that they did here, or they continue in their education, they're continuing. And I'll say this too, for anyone who's ever lost someone to suicide, for me anyway, I need to talk to I've talked to other mediums about this. They never come through alone. I can get a mother or father, they all can come through. Someone who takes their own life, they never come through alone. Someone always comes first and helps the person comes through. So I'm thinking maybe they don't have enough energy to do it themselves. Maybe they need a little help with the frequency. I never knew why that happens, but I started noticing after 2 decades of doing this work for 20 years that I said, oh, wait a minute. They never came through by themselves. They're always with someone. So if you have lost someone that way, I want to let you know they are being helped. They are being helped to heal. I just find it, for me, someone always comes through first, and then the person.
That makes sense. Because we're not alone. And the idea of creating whatever reality you want in the afterlife was described to me by my guides as like the holodeck on the Star Trek TV.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And I said, this was just like that. You can just make up and put yourself on a tennis court or on a tropical island or wherever you want, because reality, as Bill said, it's thought responsive. And then I imagine that the soul, through all its incarnations and all its journeys, has intentions and a path. So, maybe this soul really is into being a healer. So that soul's going to go into a holodeck room where they can learn about medicine or Reiki or whatever. It's all so completely self-created. We have 3 minutes.
We have 3 minutes left, and so I just want to mention one more time that if you want to get live streams of the 2015 Afterlife Conference as well as the recorded streams of the 2014 Afterlife Conference, go to beyond.com/afterlife15. That's one and grab that. Just so people know, have any questions, you have 2 minutes left to those. And then are there thoughts that you guys want, less thoughts that you guys want to give out to people watching who maybe are dealing with family members who are dying or family members who recently died?
Well, I will say this too. When someone passes away, we have physical voice now. When someone passes away, you have to learn a new form of communication. A lot of people say, John, why can't they just say, my name is Joe Smith, I lived on Bellevue Street in Syracuse, New York, because they don't have the vocals anymore. Everything is through thought, is through telepathy. So your loved ones are just a thought away. If you lose someone, keep talking to them in your mind, because a lot of people come to see me, tell my mother I love her. You tell her. You tell her, because they hear you, okay? So just know that your loved ones, one of my taglines is, your loved ones are just a thought away. Just keep putting that thought out there, because, neither death nor time can ever separate you from your loved one, everybody. So your loved one is just a thought away.
That's a perfect thought.
Great.
Thank you. And everybody out there, just a reminder, the Afterlife Conference is coming June 4th, Norfolk, Virginia. Go to afterlifeconference.com. and you will find all the information. We hope to see you there, and you'll get to see John and Karen and Bill and Anita Morjani and Suzanne Northrup and Raymond Moody and Evan Alexander and Linda Fitch. Somebody sent a note about her. Great, great people. I feel so blessed and so honored that these people want to work with me and come to my conference. So thank you. Blessings to all of you.
And we will actually have Linda Fitch on the show in 2 weeks, so we'll be speaking with her as well.
Oh, yay.
Yeah,
good.
So thank you. And from the host of Beyond Words Presents and from Beyond Words, thank you all so much for being on here. It's been an incredibly enlightening conversation. So thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you to everyone watching.
Thank you.